Greetings to everyone watching this video. This is Group 7, and in this presentation, we're going to go over the DevOps Handbook of Chapter 19, Enable and Inject Learning into Daily Work. Now, when you work on a simple program that is a straight line going from point A to point B, it's real easy to predict all the possible outcomes that occur within that system. However, this is not the world that we live in. Most organizations nowadays work on very complex systems, so much so that it's nearly impossible to predict all the outcomes that occur, and which would run the risk of having a lot of catastrophic accidents to occur, even though the programs would have like a standardatory precautionary tool to help prevent that from happening. It still would occur even with those tests being run. So the the way to figure this out is that organizations need to become better at self diagnosing themselves and to create self improvements, being able to be skilled at detecting and solving their own problems. Now, this sort of method helps any business uh, increase their dynamic system of learning, meaning that whatever mistakes they make and learn from them, they would become more resilient later on if the effects were happen again. For example, in April 21st of 2011, Amazon's web service US East suffered an outage, and what happened was that pretty much everything a part of that web service was down, including some famous sites such as Reddit and Quora. However, there was only one that was still running, and it was Netflix. And this surprised some people, wondering what exactly happened. Well, in an engineering blog, it turned out that during 2008, when Netflix was mostly a monolithic J2EE system at first, they decided to redesign the architecture into a more cloud native so that the entire system could actually run on Amazon's public cloud service. And then one of their biggest goals was to make sure that it doesn't crash the system no matter what. And by doing so, they created a system for that called Chaos Monkey, which was a program that deliberately and randomly destroys any production servers just to see if the servers can manually uh, fix themselves and reconnect uh, without the need of third party inter users. And it was because of that they were able to uh, be immune to this outage in 2011. And this was a perfect example on that businesses nowadays, in order to prevent long shutdowns from just random random acts of stuff, organizations need to adjust to a more just culture, meaning that they need to learn. They need to make not make mistakes, but like try ways of crashing the system, learning from from those accidents, and then rebuild it so that it is more resilient and immune in the future. So let's talk about the just culture a little bit. Now, one thing that you need to get your head wrapped around is that everyone makes mistakes. And then for a while now, organizations have been blaming like single objects or individuals that it's all their fault, and that it would either uh, result result in punishment or worse, being fired. And this is what people call the bad apple theory. Is like it's it's pretty much making that person by fault a scapegoat just to resolve and justify all the mistakes when in fact it it shouldn't work that way. John Alpa, the CTO, said that our goal at Etsy is to view the mistakes, errors, slips, lapses, and so forth with a perspective of learning. Now, what he means by that is that whenever an accident happens, this is more of a chance to figure out what exactly happened, how did it happen, when did it happen, if there were any other factors that caused this thing, and to figure out a way to design it so that they it never happens again. And there's two effective practices for this. There are the blameless postmortem meetings that occur right after an accident happens, and then during that time there's also a creating opportunities of practice for these inevitable problems in the future. So let's talk about one of these practices. Now, the blameless mortem meetings, they do several of the following. They would construct a timeline, figure out what, ask the who, what, where, when, and why questions, and then sort of paint an illustration on what exactly occurred and how did it occur. Another thing is to empower all the engineers by allowing them to give them detailed accounts for their contributions to these accidents. Also, to enable and encourage people who made the mistakes to be the experts of them, because they were the only ones that ever experienced this, so they've have a little bit of the knowledge or detail on exactly what happened. Also, there needs to be an acceptance that there is always a discretionary space. Everyone is is open for discussion without being ridiculed or negatively impacted in any way. And also, they would take this time to propose countermeasures to prevent any similar accidents from happening again. Now during these post-mortem meetings, detail, well, rigorous detail of records is important. You have to paint. You need to paint the illustrative picture on all perspectives of what occurred. That way, they would have more information, and then more of a solution to the problem. And then also, information is shared without the fear of punishment. Like just like the bad apple theory, nobody would get in trouble. They just want to know what happened. And then it is also important to explicitly disallow counterfactual statements. Never use like, "Oh, I could have done this. I should have done that. Like I would have done this if this didn't happen." Don't ever use those statements, because those just illustrate sort of hypothetical situations that didn't really happen. So you should never use those statements at all during these post-mortem meetings. So the key here is to just uh, tell the truth, and then just say what you saw, heard, or seen someone do, and don't try to add anything else to it.
Okay, moving into the section Publish our postmortems as widely as possible. Directly after our blameless postmortem meetings, we should widely announce the availability of the meeting notes or any associated details, for example, the IRC chat logs or external communications. Place this information into a centralized location so that the entire organization can have access to it. Postmortems have the ability to prohibit production incidents from being closed until the postmortem meeting has been completed. All of this increases organizational learning, one of the main goals of DevOps. The desire to conduct as many blameless postmortem meetings as necessary at Etsy led to some problems over the course of 4 years. Etsy accumulated a large number of postmortem meeting notes and wiki pages, which became increasingly difficult to search, save, and collaborate from. The solution was a tool developed called Morgue. Morgue easily recorded aspects of each accident in different categories like rich text, markdown format, images, tags, and history. Morgue was designed to make it easy for the team to record these different things, whether the program was due to a scheduled or an unscheduled incident, the postmortem owner, relevant IRC chat logs, especially for 3 a.m. issues when accurate note-taking may not happen, relevant JIRA tags for corrective actions and their due dates, information particularly important to management, and links to customer forum posts where customers complain about issues. Another goal should be to decrease incident tolerances to find ever weaker failure signals. As an organization, we should learn how to see and solve problems efficiently. We need to amplify weak failure signals. For example, as described in Chapter 4, when Alcoa was able to reduce the rate of workplace accidents so that they were no longer commonplace, Paul O'Neill, CEO of Alcoa, started to be notified of accident near misses in addition to actual workplace accidents. In a quote from Dr. Spear about O'Neill, it states, though it started by focusing on problems related to workplace safety, it soon found that safety problems reflected the process ignorance, and that this ignorance would also manifest itself in other problems such as quality, timeliness, and yield versus scrap. When we work within complex systems, this need to amplify weak failure signals is critical to averting catastrophic failures. Organizations are typically structured in one of two models. A standardized model where routine and systems govern everything, including strict compliance with timelines and budgets, or an experimental model where every day, every exercise, and every piece of new information is evaluated and debated in a culture that resembles a research and design lab. Our work in the technology value stream should be approached as a fundamentally experimental endeavor and managed that way. Now on to redefine failure and encourage calculated risk-taking. Very quickly, we should all understand that leaders of an organization, whether deliberately or inadvertently, reinforce the organization culture and values through their actions. What we have learned, high-performing DevOps organizations will fail and make mistakes more often. A quote from Roy Rappaport from Netflix, I was talking with a coworker about a massive outage we just had at Netflix. It was caused by a dumb mistake. In fact, it was caused by an engineer who had taken down Netflix twice in the last 18 months. But of course, this is a person we'd never fire. In that same 18 months, this engineer moved the state of our operations and automation forward, not by miles, but by light years. That work has enabled us to do deployments safely on a daily basis and has personally performed huge numbers of production deployments.
Alright, so now we're going to look into how the injection of failures into production enables resilience and learning. We can liken the idea of allowing failures to happen in specific, controlled ways to the crumple zones built into cars. Without failure modes, unpredictable and dangerous results usually emerge. Resilience dictates that we define our failure modes and then perform testing to verify they work as designed. One way we can do this is to inject fault into our production. When the fault has been injected, we then begin rehearsing large-scale failure response so that when they actually occur, we can be ready. The Amazon Netflix examples we talked about earlier are just one example. Another example is during what has been dubbed the Great Amazon Reboot of 2014. During this episode, Nearly 10% of Amazon's entire EC2 server base had to be rebooted to apply an emergency Zen security patch. But due to the exercises with Chaos Monkey, Netflix experienced zero downtime that weekend, largely due to their extensive planning with the Chaos Monkey. Alright, so then on the next slide, we'll be talking about the institutioning of game days for the purpose of rehearsing failures. Game days are popularized by Jesse Robbins for the work he did at Amazon, where he was known internally as the Master of Disaster. Game days concepts come from the line of thinking known as resilience engineering. Game day is an exercise to increase resilience through large-scale fault injection across critical parts of the system. The goal behind game day is to help teams simulate their accident response for the purpose of practice. We give the team adequate time to prepare, eliminate points of failure, and create monitoring procedures. Some of the drills include database failovers for the purpose of verifying the secondary database works. Another is the turning off of important network connections to expose more problems. After problems are identified, they're addressed and tested again. Through this process, we discover latent defects in our system, which are only discovered because of this testing. All this testing results in increased resilience and a higher degree of assurance that we can continue operations when problems occur. So then on to our conclusion. For us to create a just culture, it requires us to recontextualize our previous thoughts on what a failure actually is. This will create a dynamic learning environment where everyone feels safe enough to come forward with ideas and observations. Blameless postmortems and the injection of production failures reinforce this culture of everyone feeling comfortable with failure. So this has been our discussion on the injection of learning into our daily work. Thanks for watching.